Society, said George Orwell, has always to demand a little more from human beings than it will get in practice. That is the essence of Europe's new counter-terrorism strategy. Fighting terrorism is mission impossible. Stopping the lone wolf demands massive investment in big data infrastructure and the willingness to action intelligence. Europe is now demanding of its security apparatus more than it can really hope to get. But 3 new security policies have made their way through the Brussels legislature in June, tackling external borders at sea, on land and in our homes, because the challenge is not just migration and the collapse of Schengen, but the rise of radical Islamists, homegrown and trained in the theatre of Syrian catastrophe. When they return home, they're not just radicalized, but engaged in a war with Europe.
We are winning in Syria and Iraq. And for the time being, Daesh is very much degraded. I would bet that before 1 year, the organization will, in Syria and Iraq, completely destroyed. That will prompt many foreign terrorist fighters from Europe to return. We have to be prepared to digest, to handle this flow of returnees. We'll not bring them all in jail for sometimes lack of evidence, but also because it's sometimes desirable to offer an alternative to prison.
When they come back, don't let them just, they done nothing, they okay, come in. No, put them in a sort of a open detention. Make them appear every day in teachings. What's wrong with counter-indoctrination?
Most of these atrocities were executed by citizens who grew up in our own cities, among ourselves, among our midst, sometimes in a process of self-radicalization. We are faced with individuals who turn their back on our societies and the universal values on freedom, equality and free speech.
The European Parliament has recently voted to adopt new security measures for Europe's external borders to help secure the Schengen area. I asked the dossier's rapporteur what the key changes are.
Now we will have controls, systematic controls at the external borders of the European Union for both EU citizens and non-EU citizens. There will be exceptions. So if a member state would say, look, it's too crowded at this border and it takes days to cross people in and to check them into the databases, because it's about checking into the databases, then they can ask for derogations.
Not everything was plain sailing. The European Parliament's political groups didn't agree on the level of control set out in the text.
It was a very difficult process because our rapporteur, Monica Macovei, she had a rather very different ideological approach. She was even stricter than the original Commission proposal, so this systematic, very tough checks of all EU citizens, including basically everywhere. So it's something that was pretty unreasonable, I would say, but during the negotiations we really tried on one hand to secure legislation, to do a positive step, but as well to remain reasonable and find compromises.
Die Definitionen, was sind terroristische Straftaten, völlig unklar bleiben. Und jetzt nehme ich mal eine vor, deswegen habe ich das hier mitgebracht. Also was ist denn eine terroristische Straftat? Zum Beispiel öffentliche Stellen oder eine internationale Organisation rechtswidrig zu einem Tun oder Unterlassen zu zwingen. Das hieß ja a priori, jedes staatliche Handeln ist gut und steht gewissermaßen unter der Ägide, wer dagegen etwas tut, der wird mit Antiterrormaßnahmen zu tun haben.
I am from ECR. ECR and EPP wanted systematic checks as a rule and targeted checks as an exception. Targeted means you don't check into the databases everyone, but only when we have information about person A or B. Liberals and Socialists and Greens and other groups wanted targeted checks as a rule and systematic as an exception.
Do you see big differences between the political groups and how they address counterterrorism?
Yes.
We need to strike the right balance between individual freedom, integrity on one hand, and security and safety on the other hand. It is completely feasible. It's possible to do it. But certain groups tend to underline the importance of one of the elements, when I believe, as a liberal, that we should do both.
Socialists and Democrats, we really tried to secure some sort of flexibility, that we will not make systematic checks of each EU citizens coming and leaving, but to be more reasonable on that. So when you have a heavy tourist season, or when you have, I don't know, workers daily traveling across the border, that we try to be a bit flexible.
Was wir auch kritisieren, dass zum Beispiel der Tatbestand sein soll Public Provocation. Das klingt natürlich toll. Da sagt der Bürger, ja, klasse, warum denn nicht? Man soll ja nicht provozieren zum Terrorismus. Aber was ist das eigentlich? Das ist so breit. Und wir sind wieder bei dem Thema Daten sammeln und dann das eigentliche Ziel verfehlen.
Mining big data is the name of the game, of the future game, on top of other intelligence gathering. The next thing is that you have the legal infrastructure to use your intelligence effectively.
Privacy concerns are being gradually pressed by security needs, but without big data, hunting the lone wolf or the hunting pack is like a blind man crossing a busy road, a game of chance. Justice, however, must be blind. Profiling terrorist threats may bring more security, but may also bring a less free, less just society.
Man kann den Antiterrorkampf, der notwendig ist, für den wir auch sind, für den wir uns engagieren, den kann man nur durch klare Zielsetzungen, Verbindlichkeiten und exakte Definitionen befördern.
You are looking for very few, dozens of people, a group of 20 people the most, that are involved in some kind of clandestine action inside the civil society.
What have we seen in recent months with this huge phenomenon of foreign terrorist fighters? More than 5,000 Europeans who left Europe to go and fight alongside Daesh and Jabhat al-Nusra in Syria and Iraq, that some teenager got radicalized on internet only and left 15 days after having started going on some website and some social networks.
Israel has long lived with the internal and external security issues related to radical Islamic groups, but Israelis have been faced not just with attacks upon the structure of their everyday life, but a battle for survival as a nation. This reality has created a dependence on a formidable security network. What lessons can Europe learn from Israel?
I think they have to create a sort of a European intelligence coordinating group, that its aim is not only gather the information, but its aim is to guide the national intelligence services and to have a dissemination system that can work in terms of minutes. I'm talking about minutes, not hours.
The information sharing should be mandatory, because we know that there are cases where one member state kept information on a suspect but didn't share it with the member state concerned, which is of course a huge problem.
Is this the end of the story, or is this just this year's edition? Do we get another version next year?
I can never exclude other versions, because we are so rapidly now changing legislation when it comes to security, when it comes to external EU borders or gathering the data of passengers. We are really maybe rushing too fast and not too wise.
The real test of success will not be the capture and detention of many jihadis. The measure of Europe's counter-terrorist success will be whether Europe is a place at peace with itself, or whether we live looking for danger in the shadows. Orwell said, "Men can only be happy when they do not assume that the object of life is happiness." Europe's objective is not happiness, but security, stability, freedom from oppression. Will our counter-terrorism strategy enslave us, or will big data liberate Europe.